Hi, my name is Ruvain Travis, and I have been a day school educator for 20 years. I have taught students ranging from second grade to high school. I have supervised and mentored teachers, and I have written and implemented a number of different curricula for Jewish studies and Bible courses. Over the years, I have taught and watched others teach the book of Genesis many times, and I have worked with parents who wanted to share the stories and lessons from Genesis at home with their children in a meaningful way. I have observed that learning Genesis with children is often viewed as a challenge due to the complex relationships and concepts it contains. I would argue that this complexity provides an opportunity to challenge young minds and to encourage them to ask questions which will make the stories far more meaningful to them. Children are capable of so much more than we credit them for. Let me explain. First and foremost, we should never underestimate what children can grasp. Doing so leads to oversimplifying or even spoon feeding them information. And this, in turn, means we convey to children important stories from Genesis without having them truly engage with the material. Our goal should always be for children to ask thoughtful, insightful questions. Second, there is no need to shy away from challenging topics. Those of us familiar with Genesis know it is filled with amazing stories, stories of brave men and women doing incredible things. Yet Genesis also has some very nuanced narratives that beg for hard to answer questions. We should be encouraging these questions, not glossing over them. For instance, why would Adam and Eve eat from the one tree God told them not to eat from? Why would people challenge God by building a tower that reached to the heavens? What made Noah so special that only he and his family were spared from the great flood? When we shy away from such difficult questions, we deprive children of the opportunity to engage with the text and to find meaning in the text. My experience has shown me that children are fully capable of such engagement. All this is background to my latest book, A Curious Student's Guide to the Book of Genesis. It is written for teachers and parents of students in grades 3, 4, and 5. And in writing it, I had two overarching goals in mind. The first is to help children learn to ask questions about the text they are studying, because, at the end of the day, teaching children to ask questions is among the most important things we should be doing as parents and as educators. The second is to provide parents and teachers with a framework for showing children how to engage with the text and to teach them to look for the life lessons that flow so readily from the biblical narrative. This, of course, will make them active instead of passive learners. Most importantly, my book is crafted to encourage children to ask questions. Learning to formulate questions is a good skill for young students to develop in and of itself. Asking questions can also deepen our connections to the ones we ask, whether they be our parents, our teachers, or even God. With this in mind, let's talk about the three-tiered structure of the book itself. First, there are stories. Each chapter of this book opens with a brief overview and synopsis of various sections of Genesis. Next come life lessons. The synopsis is followed by a section called Life Lessons from This Week's Reading, which is intended to help children think more deeply about that section of a particular text or story, as opposed to merely memorizing certain incidents from the narrative. And finally, there are reflections. These are questions designed to help children relate to the material and make it their own. As an example of this approach, let's examine the creation story set forth in the opening chapters of Genesis. Each of the life lessons I use flows from a big picture question that sometimes almost leaps from the pages of Genesis. With the creation story, it is this: what did God create first, and why does it matter? Most children already know the order of creation. that the simpler forms of life come first, things like plants and trees. Then come birds and sea creatures, followed by all the animals that live on dry land. Only in the end does God create humans. This is interesting. God makes it clear that humans are to be in control of life on our planet. Why then does God create people last and not first? Wouldn't it make sense to begin with the most important thing and work your way backwards from there? Shouldn't our children be asking questions like these? And once children start asking such questions, it becomes easier to help them discover the life lessons to be learned from the order of creation. One thing we learn from the creation story is that even things we see as completely unimportant, like fleas or mosquitoes or flies, they were all created before humans. It is as if God were saying to humans, I made fleas and mosquitoes and flies before you. What makes you think you're so very important? To put this life lesson in language children can relate to, this story teaches us not to have a big ego and not to think that we're better or more important than others. In challenging students to apply this lesson to their own lives, I pose these reflective questions. Have you ever had a friend who acted like he or she was better or more important than you? How did that make you feel? What do you think you could have done to let him or her know that everyone is important in some way? I hope this discussion and the sample lessons I have shared today helped you recognize the importance of rethinking how we teach Genesis to elementary age students. I really believe that my book can be an important tool in helping you craft new ways to teach this essential biblical text, whether you are a teacher or a parent. And I hope you will too, once you buy and start using this book. A Curious Student's Guide to the Book of Genesis is now available from Amazon and other booksellers. If you would like to discuss this presentation specifically, or the teaching of Genesis generally, feel free to reach out to me at ruvain.travis@gmail.com or visit my website at www.ruvaintravisauthor.com. Thanks again for taking the time to listen to this presentation.